All righty, can you hear me better?
Yeah, that's great.
All right, isn't technology wonderful? Ruining the momentum of the presentation.
Good one, Parker. Come on.
Yeah, I apologize. I was on my virtual work machine, so I'm glad we got this worked out. All right, so as Andy mentioned, we're in a FEMA regulatory floodplain. So part of that process of getting a permit for a project like this is doing hydrologic and hydraulic modeling. And we did cross-reference our modeling with the effective FEMA flood insurance study. That showed that we had water velocities around the 3 feet per second range in the floodplain at the shelter. And when we did our modeling, we had around 2 feet per second at the shelter. So we're at a relatively low velocity area within the creek. You can go ahead and move to the next slide. All right, the second part of this was to really try to understand what the impacts of the shelter or of flooding would be on the shelter. As Andy mentioned, we're sort of in a flat kind of plateau area in the floodplain. And our modeling showed that we had a relatively shallow flooding area around the shelter, ranging between 1 foot to 1.5 feet, 1.5 feet with regards to depth. You can move to the next slide. And really the final step of this was illustrating the impact of the shelter on the regulatory floodway, which is sort of that's the image to the left is where the shelter fits, is currently kind of configured within the effective FEMA map. So that red hatch is what's called the regulatory floodway, which, in FEMA terms is really the area of the floodplain that's reserved for the highest velocity flows. And so, FEMA, the state of Wisconsin and the village all, have rules and regulations that you have to follow when you're building in areas like this. And the principal one is what's called a no rise, which is essentially, that what you're doing can't increase the height of the regional flood. And that's really the meat and potatoes of what we're trying to show with our modeling. And ultimately, in order to get a permit for the project, what we ended up showing is, what we ended up finding is under the right conditions, we believe there's a path forward with, a shelter in the floodway and achieving a no rise. And that's what the image to the right shows. That's just the results of the hydraulic modeling. And it's not really meant to show a whole lot. It's actually, it's essentially an overlay between an existing conditions model and a model with the obstruction caused by the shelter in it. And if those lines look the same, that's a good thing. That means that, we're not increasing the regional flood elevation as a result of this type of project. So, like I said, with the modeling, it shows a path forward for something like this. So you can go ahead and move on.
And this is Andy again. Just in summary of where we're at in terms of design in the project, the next portion of this, we would start looking at the conceptual development plan and what items we would want to include, and starting to break down costs on the site. You can go to the next slide, Mike. And finally, looking at just a preliminary schedule here of how this lays out, and we're at the second blue box there today, and looking at how this information starts to stack up on top of each other, moving through the schematic design and finally into the concept development. So that really does it for our presentation. And I don't know if Mike wants to elaborate on anything else, or if anyone else has some questions right now, we're more than happy to help out.
First, thank you very much for coming here tonight to kind of give everybody this overview of all of that information. I think it'd be a good time to kind of start off with any questions that anybody has. If you have a question, yeah, you want to just raise your hand or unmute yourself.
I have a question for Parker and Andy. I think that the biggest potential barrier to this happening is the concern for impact on the floodplain. And I can appreciate what you just shared, Parker, with the H&H study. I just wonder, how would you respond to someone who challenges, well, that's not necessarily strong, it's just like a model. What evidence do you have that this isn't going to, something that says it's more robustly assures residents and stakeholders that this shelter would not negatively impact the regulatory floodplain.
Sure. I mean, I could give you kind of the engineering answer, and that what we use for the modeling is, it's sort of the industry standard, and that's what, it's something that we've worked with, Wisconsin DNR and other stakeholders with that are familiar with that process. And it's something that from a regulatory, from a permitting threshold, it's really what most people are familiar with. It's something that, we believe reviewers understand. And so, it's going through that regulatory process and what our understanding of what the model means. I mean, we feel comfortable with what it says. I've worked with this program for years and years and done projects similar to this that have ended up, being proven fine. And then I guess,
I guess that might be good to be prepared with that type of information too.
Yeah. Yep.
This type of project has been done in a similar.
Yeah, we've done, I've done, trails that are in the floodway that are miles and miles long. We've done that come with bridges and other types of structures. It's a pretty common procedure when you're in the floodway like this, and something that I'm familiar with. And then I guess, kind of the maybe the less technical answer is, we would, if we're building something like this, we would also make sure that, we're minimizing the amount of obstruction. We could look at different finishes, but ultimately what we would want to do, or what we would want to show, I guess, is sort of a minimum amount of obstruction from like, say, minimizing the length of, or minimizing the width of like the columns that support the roof. And if that, and potentially if we were to cut out or do some excavation to make a flat slab, that also sort of makes up for from a volume standpoint, we're probably creating more volume. So those are things that, we're not necessarily confirmed that we're doing, but things that I've looked at when I've run different sort of scenarios in the modeling to try to mitigate the impact of the obstruction. So that's kind of, that would be my response to that.
Can I try to get a summary of this, just so that I understand it? So basically you're saying if we were to have a flood, the highest water level you think it would be a foot to a foot and a half, correct?
The depth, yep, at that location, yep.
And so because we're building an open air structure and not a building with walls, if it was to flood, there's very little that's getting in the way of the water flow. So we're really not impacting it much.
Right, yep.
So the real big question is, if we were to have a flood, what's the likelihood that that flood would damage the structure that we're potentially interested in building?
Right, and that's another thing that we don't, you don't necessarily show that with modeling. That's more of a anecdotal thing. I would say with the low velocities that we show, relatively speaking, your risk of your risk of damage to a structure like this is low. I mean, you're not going to completely eliminate the potential for damage, but in a situation like this where you have, I would consider relatively shallow depths and slower velocities, your chances are higher than say, you know, something where you're 10 feet deep and you have velocities of 6 or 8 feet per second.
So given the fact that we just had a 100-year flood 2 or 3 years ago, are you guys able to look at tables or records to basically say where that water was at in that same area? And
We
compare
can't.
if we had something similar, how it would impact the structure?
Yeah, we can use, so I mean, we just use, for this, we use the regulatory discharges. So the flow in the channel that's for the 100-year event that's listed in the flood insurance study, but it takes 2 seconds in the modeling software to create a new run essentially that has, if you have data that shows what the flow was, or we can kind of back solve for it and say, okay, you know, if you have, if we had 2 feet of depth here, we can sort of backtrack and figure out what the discharge was. So if we have some data like that, that's really easy to create and re-simulate.
I mean, personally, that's something that I would like to see, because most of the residents are going to agree that they've never seen any kind of flooding like that before.
Yep.
And everybody's calling it the 100-year flood. So if we can compare the impacts of something like that on what it would be if we built this structure, I think everybody would feel pretty comfortable about moving forward.
Sure.
That's all I had.
Mike Padger.
Hi, Parker. Couple questions. Is the slab at grade? And if so, is there any precautions? I mean, my concern would be that if you got a flood, that slab could get undermined and, you know, cause the slab to, you know, to heave or to crack. Any precautions we can take to minimize that? And, you know, I personally, and probably some of these other people, saw that flood of a couple of years ago, and the water is one issue, but there was another issue with things flowing down there, you know, logs and campers and multiple things. Is there a way, you know, I kind of envisioned the pillars potentially, you know, having the footings extend up out of the ground before you started the structure of the building, just maybe as a way to prevent damage from items hitting it. And, you know, if you did that, you know, in my mind, I was thinking, okay, someday we, you know, or right away we put bricks or stones around that to make it appealing. Is that something that would be an option?
So
Go ahead, Parker.
well, I was gonna say, answer the first thing. We would want the slab to be at as much at grade as possible, or potentially just maybe a few inches below current grade, so we can get more volume. We likely wouldn't advocate that we fill it, because that's another obstruction in the floodway, and you know, that almost certainly would increase flood heights. In terms of ways to protect the concrete, that's, I guess, something that I'm not an expert in. So I guess I wouldn't speak to that at this time. So I apologize for that. But I mean, I know there are ways to do it. It's just not something I'm an expert on. So I'm not going to speak to that. In terms of preventing damage from items hitting it, you know, or your comment about, you know, having bricks or stones around it, that's another thing that would be an obstruction. And another thing we would throw in our model. Currently, I just ran it with the posts with no bricks or stones around it. That's something that could be looked into, but the con of that is we would have to, there would be other mitigation steps we would have to take in order for us to meet the no rise requirement. So I haven't run it or tested it, but the more obstruction we add, kind of the more we would have to do to mitigate for that and to prove that. So it's not out of the question, but those are.
So are you running like an 8x8 post? Is that what you're?
I think it was. I think I had a 6x6.
Okay.
Is what I had in the model. So something thin. And we're still working through sort of the nitty gritty details too. Just for for this purpose, I wanted to know that I had an option that worked.
What are the diameters of your footings? Like 18 inches or something, or?
Andy, do you know the diameters of the footings?
That's something we would coordinate with the shelter manufacturer. They have pretty tight specifications that would have to follow for a minimum. I think just offhand, my guess would be they would do a sono tube, so a cylindrical tube that they would put in the ground. There'd probably be 24-inch diameter is my guess. Again, it really depends on the manufacturer you go with and what their regulations are that they would require you to follow. But in terms of your slab question, there's ways you can minimize undermining of that. And just by nature of the shelter, we would have a very minimal pitch or slope across the shelter, so you can make sure that the way the water flows, it might angle appropriately the pitch of the concrete. So if an obstruction does hit that concrete, it's not making a direct impact on a perpendicular face of concrete. You can I can go into more detail about the geotechnical report, but there's certain requirements that they go through in terms of concrete thickness, and a lot of concrete for roadways can be up to 8 inches thick, which is pretty heavy duty, and that could take a lot of impact. And a lot of times for a shelter project like this, you might only see 4 to 5 inches for a typical pour. So that concrete slab can become quite a bit thicker to take any sort of force of water and the obstacles that move through it.
Is there any consideration for, if you put picnic tables and things underneath that shelter, how they would obstruct the flow or get carried away?
There can be. We didn't at this time because I guess picnic tables they're somewhat of an obstruction, but they're really more of a debris hazard, especially if we have an open shelter. I mean, in terms of getting carried away, I mean, I would almost leave that to the village to answer that, but you can bolt them down, or there's ways to bolt it to the slab.
Yeah, real quick, Mike, I already had that discussion with others, including our engineer and Jerry, our public facilities director, and that wouldn't have an impact on the flow of the water. They don't see that. Debris could be something, but we would probably, once we get to the design element, look at, concrete anchors in there that the picnic tables would be holding, which doesn't change the flow of the water, is what he told me. So.
And I would agree with that.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Anything to?
I'll just say one other thing. On the site, the location of that, I'm sure that you've accounted and that location for a crowd of people out in front. And I see you had some different amenities that they could be adding. Are you going to set it so that would possibly be, the ability to add additional shelters or add, an additional feature in the park at some point? I mean, I think that's something we should maybe consider, whether it's an ice skating rink or, benches or something. It looked like you had plenty of room there where you could, between the location and the creek, there was quite a bit of room there.
Yeah, we haven't put the exact location on there yet. There's room to move it around, and I don't think we want to lock lock down an exact location now, and we certainly don't want to limit any future expansion of amenities in that space. So that's something we definitely consider in the conceptual design phase of its location, and what are the other amenities and how they're interacting with it.
Okay.
So we can plan for that.
So this is just a tentative location at this point.
Correct. Yep.
Kevin England.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the overview, and this is pretty interesting, at least from my perspective. I'm part of the Lions group as well. My question then would just be, your comment would be the discussion that you just had around maybe what that tolerance is on any obstruction or impact to that flow. It would be nice to know, obviously, with a 6x6 column, that's squared off right now or round, whatever that may be, is what is that tolerance we have? So if we want to start thinking about or investing in some type of, to Mike's point, some type of wrap or column bricks, decorative, or other, just making beefier base on that, just so it can take a blow from a park bench or picnic table up the way if there is a flood. But what is that tolerance? And it would be nice if that model could be run with not only the 6x6, but a 10x10. And then is it 4 columns? Is it 6 columns? Obviously, all those have an impact too. So it would just be nice to know what the tolerance was. So when we are looking at investing or phasing this work out, we'll at least know what the potential is up front.
Sure. Yeah. And I did run a number of scenarios to try to test that, and I can get more specific as we move along. There's always sort of a balancing act between, if you obstruct more, you might want to cut more so you have more volume.
Sure.
Or excavate more. The ones that didn't quite meet the no rise standard were, from my recollection, off by, I think it was no more than 0.05 feet or something like that. So that's less than an inch. Which, from FEMA's and the regulatory standpoint, that's still 0.01 is still unacceptable, but we're not far off. So in terms of your tolerance question, it's, I think there are things that we can do. I'm not going to commit to anything because we're just early on in the game, but it's real easy for me to run different options and kind of see what, where we can go and what the pros and cons too of each are.
Well, I guess to Mike's point, was this run with 8 pillars or 6 pillars or posts?
It was run with 4. There was a Andy shared with me sort of a concept from a shelter builder, and it had 4.
We're looking at a 40-foot shelter, I think, aren't we? You're just talking about 1 post on each corner?
Well, it was it's sort of the one I threw in there was, it's sort of tiered so that there's, on the one side there's 2 posts that are wider than that are out wide, and then it sort of funnels down, and on the other side there's 2 posts that are in a little bit further from the wide side, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
This
is Kevin. Yeah, I think it's Mike, the design that I'm guessing was shared is the one that we proposed for the Lions shelter, which has 4 pillars. Again, if you're limited to 4 and you're trying to minimize the impact, you're going to go 4 versus 6. And if you're going to try to go 4 versus 6, you're going to go steel versus wood. So I think those are all the things that we would just have to think about, because cost varies, right? And it's going to impact, the overall pavilion or shelter cost. But playing with those tolerances, I guess, is where I was going. Mm-hmm. And there's different ways to mitigate, to your point, Parker. Sorry for interruption. I'm done.
Correct. And just for reference, we were looking at a polygon constellation amphitheater just as a starting point that was, I think, 30 by 40 in this location that has four columns, and they're tapered on the back side. So they're set a little bit closer. And we didn't run any 6 posts or anything, or 6 columns or anything like that. Just the one model here.
This is Sean Mitchin. I'm also a line, and actually an architect. And I guess I would feel a lot better if we assumed 6, just because of structural efficiencies. I mean, it's a pretty long span for a park structure, and depending on our budget, columns are cheaper than big joists. So just so we don't get ourselves in a pickle later. That's all. I don't want to. It's obviously early in the stage, and I'm not trying to set the schematic agenda design, but I think would be a safer assumption of 6. Just my opinion. You guys are the pros, so.
I agree with you, Sean. I think that, the structure that we proposed is probably on the higher end as far as the cost goes. And, one of the determining factors on this is going to be, paying for this all. And as Kevin mentioned many times, if our funding comes up short, we may have to scale things down or change things. And so I'd hate to get us into a bind where if we needed to go to a plain rectangular shelter that had 6 or 8 posts on it, we couldn't do that because of the issue with water restrictions. So I think we really should look at 6 or maybe even 8. I mean, there's rectangular structures from Polygon that are very nice looking that, have 8 posts on them. But
or on the flip side, that
in a corner.
Yeah, or on the flip side, to actually know that we can only do 4, as
Right.
a design.
And I think that's something we could lay that data out, saying, here's 4 posts, 6 posts, 8 posts, here's the thresholds where they fall, and give us a little bit of guidance of what we can and can't do.
Yep,
I
and
think
that's
that would be good.
yep, and that's very easy to do. So we'll do that.
I don't feel like this is at a stage where it can go to the village board yet without some of those things.
No, and tonight was really a kickoff for all of you to have these questions and allow them to go out and do some more work and kind of brainstorm in regards to what they could do or what we could do, and then come back to the group again. So it's just kind of a meet and greet kickoff, and these are all great questions, I think, for everyone to kind of think about and go back to, just as long as we don't get too far ahead of ourselves, and but also keep the project kind of moving.
So Mike, was this the initial process to see if it was worth going to the next step and spending more money? I mean, is that where we're at now?
That would be more of an Andy question. I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're getting closer. This was, and
yeah, this was, like Mike was saying, the initial kickoff meeting, and it's good to hear these questions because we're about at that stage where we can consolidate all this information and put it together in more of like a written format and report that the village administrator can review and give a thumbs up to, or collectively the council can look at this and say yay or nay. So we're about at that stage, but I think this is a good first step to hear some of the questions.
I think that, I don't know, did I see on the previous slide? Can you go to the previous slide? The one with the estimated cost of $175,000.
yeah, it's right here. Can you see it?
Yeah, I guess, am I alone in thinking that's much higher than this initial project was projected to be?
I thought the discussion with the group was that we should aim as high as we think we should, or aim highest, and then figure out what's feasible and what we can get within the floodplain, and then really see what's doable.
Yeah.
rather than limit ourselves from the beginning. I mean, we're not asking to spend that kind of money yet. It's just what's possible and what could we get for 175,000. I mean, I'd hate to just say, oh, we're going to spend this 50 grand and then nobody wants to do that. And maybe if we look at spending more money, there's more interest and potentially more donations. So
Yeah, so I think, I don't know how the Lions representatives feel about this and the other committee members, but I guess I would like to see some different maybe like 2 or 3 options at different price points. Yeah, like
I think starting initially, just saying, I think Andy and Parker are on the right path. Figuring out what we can do before we even discuss what type of money we're really willing to put out there. I think that's a decision that obviously this committee and the Lions need to make about wanting them to move forward with, if they come back, they did a 4, a 6, and an 8. We understand that we can do the project now. Like, at least with a 4 pillar, we understand that we can do it. There are things that are going to need to be done to make it happen, but we can do it. And I think that's what we need to answer first as a committee, and have that sent on to staff and then on to the village board for that final approval, because they're the ones at the end of the day that are going to drive this forward. And I think at that point, when we realize we can do a 4 post or a 6 post or an 8 post, whichever we can do, we realize at that time we can do the project in that location. And now let's start talking about, the schematics and aspects of what it's going to cost.
Mike, can I, this might be a question I've already asked, but that 175, is that just for the structure, or is that installation construction?
That's only the structure from what I've understood, right?
Yeah, that's how I understood it too.
Yep.
I just
That's
want people
correct.
to be aware of that. Yeah.
Yep.
The steel beam structure with wood, and so it's the exact polygon, non-negotiated 3-year-old quote, going on 3-year-old quote from Polygon. So I think it is what it is. My last comments on this piece, because we've, I agree with, Mike X and your thoughts on that. When we took this to the public and we laid out 4 to 6 different designs, it was cost neutral. So cost wasn't factored in at that point. It was what would appeal for meeting the needs that we felt that pavilion would be used for in that area. And we also got feedback on that. So that was directional information that we used to say, minus dollars, here's what we think is from an architectural standpoint. And by the way, there is a cost a rough cost estimate that was provided to us. But I think that whole RFP process and everything else, and there's ways to mitigate these costs, which I kind of talked about in the presentation. I know when I give it to you guys to offset, there's a lot of different ways. And that whole journey on how to pay for it, I think, is a conversation in itself. But I guess from my perspective and kind of the Lions approach that we ended up taking and presenting it to you was that we gave you what we thought done could look like, and that's the vision. And then from there, we work on the feasibility, which we're doing. And then from there, you work on design, conceptual design and fundraising to drive to a reasonable or doable end product. So that's at least my thought on that. Thank you.
Well, I agree with you, Kevin. I think you and I disagree on some of these points, because my concern is the limiting, once we figure out we can put it in there and don't have an issue with the flooding, then the limiting factor is going to be whether or not the board approves it. And, we can go through a lot of work, and if the board says there's no way we can afford that, then, we either need to scale things back down a lot, or the project's not going to move forward. So I do think that's an important issue that we have to look at.
Yeah, I don't doubt it, and, you know, Mike, you and I can talk about this more offline as well. But I know we've covered this, is that the village board's going to be looking at what the public interest is in addition to that. And if there's contingencies that the village is comfortable donating X amount, say 100,000, then the next 100,000 or 200,000 has to come from capital fundraising campaigns, grants, and other creative means to offset that. It doesn't mean that this shelter, as it is and as it's presented here or proposed, is not doable at that point, just because the village can't front. Maybe there's only a comfort level that the village has. So I think there's different ways that it can be pitched, or it's a multi-year, budget item, or it's phased work. So I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is Sean Mitchell again. I think, the village needs a vision first. Obviously, we got to know if we can do it and what is feasible structurally and engineering wise, but the village needs a vision. And if we need to narrow that vision, obviously, we'll have to do that. But, right now, I think we need a vision in order to fundraise, raise interest, get people behind it, and then go from there. I guess that's my comment.
Yeah, and I think, we've had discussions at the Lions level that, the Lions are looking at additional fundraising, and, I don't feel comfortable at this point saying, we have a certain amount of money set aside already. And I think that if we do additional fundraising, we can do that. So, there's potential, certainly.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate a little bit here on the fact that, in general, any public project, if you looked at the price tag right away without the impact that it's going to have, you probably wouldn't do any projects, right? The public projects tend to be, a large, especially when they're meeting the needs of all the community, they tend to be a large amount of money. So that's why I've tried to say from the beginning, I understand that the cost and those things are important, but let's get the vision first. And if we have to scale back and make it smaller, maybe, they have 30 by 40 on here, maybe it's, 15 by 25, but at least then we know that we can do the project, and, we can figure out where we need to cut costs or where we need to raise money for future. If you would have told me, even 5 years ago that we were going to have a $150,000 playground that is sitting in the village of Cross Plains, and it wasn't not based off tax money or capital funds at all, I would have told you, like, there's no way. But we were able to do that. And so I think there is a possibility. I don't think we need to worry today so much on the cost. We need to really worry about, is the project feasible? Is it something that we can do? Are there ways that we can make it happen? And then take it to the village board for their approval or dismissal at that time. So.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. I just want to make sure that Andy and Parker understand that, this may have to be scaled or adjusted depending how we do. I would love to see, the Taj Mahal, and I hope we can do it.
All right. Well, thank you.
As a village board member, I just want to say that I think the priority on the floodplain and impermeable surfaces and optics of putting something like this in the floodplain is a really high priority from the village board standpoint. So.
All right, thank you.
Well, Andy and Parker, thank you very much for your time and information. I'll be in touch with you over the next couple of weeks and kind of plan to have you back, or at least have Andy back for our next month's meeting to kind of go into this a little bit further, so we can take it back to staff and take the final version there, or opportunity to the village board. So thanks for your time tonight.
Yeah, thanks guys. And Mike will be in touch, and thanks for everyone's time this evening.
Yep, thanks for having us.
All right, we don't need any action on this, right, Mike?
Depends if you want some. Do you want some action, from the committee in regards to what the next move you want me to do? I mean, my plan is to kind of get a report from them. I'd like to see everything they were talking about tonight more in a report standpoint for us to look at. And then, the questions that were kind of brought up, I just have, based on, the pillars, the sizes, and those things are going to impact that floodplain or the water, the flow. So, my plan was just to have them come up with a few options, of a 4-post, 6-post, 8-posts. They can even do different sizes. Or maybe what they do is just give us the size recommendation and then the least or the largest size that can be put underneath that shelter for post diameter that won't impact that floodplain. You could ask that too. So,
Mike, do you know on that structure that Kevin proposed, are those 6x6 posts, do you think?
I
I mean, that's something we can check with Polygon and find out real quickly, but
think they are, and there is only 4 of them.
yeah. Yeah, and that structure has got, some big bends in it, which probably give it more strength so it can span a longer distance.
Yeah, I don't see that, like the diameter aspect of it on here, but
Yeah. Well, I think the good news is that it looks like, it can go in there. My concern was that it would go in and potentially, cause additional flooding or, could be damaged in a flood. But the good news is it sounds like that we can work around that. We have somebody that is an expert telling us that versus us just kind of assuming it.
yeah. I don't see the post diameter is on here. The footings are 3 feet wide, so.
Oh, the footings that they recommended.
This is a different plan, but it's
Okay.
just footings to a similar structure that
Yeah, well, he had mentioned 24 inches, and that's pretty close. It's in the ballpark.
so. Sarah, from the committee standpoint, is there anything in particular you want staff to do? You could put that in a motion. Otherwise, you can table it till next month as well. We wouldn't be moving any of this information onto the village board, so it's okay.
I just want to make sure it stays, this project is on the agenda for next month. So do you think it's reasonable to expect that we will have a more concrete report from Snyder, possibly with the 4, 6, and 8 options?
Yeah, I think so. The last report they did, after they had the geotech report or person come out and do the geotech, they got the rest of it done really quickly. So I would expect this new hydro report to be pretty quick turnaround. So I think if we have it on the committee agenda for next month, it should be ready to go to the village board then, the final. So,
Mike, did you gather that they were going to try to put some data together using that flood from 3 years ago?
Yeah, yep. So I have that written down too. So, and I don't know, that may be just us sending pictures to them as well. That might be the best. Or having us go out and do some measurements. I don't know what type of information, FEMA got from that or where they would get that type of report unless it's from staff or, in-house. I don't know who keeps that type of info. Maybe our engineers have it, I guess, but.
Yeah, there might be something online where they had the record high watermarks or something on it.
Right, yeah.
And,
He said though, if you have the data, like it sounded like we'd have to provide, or the village would have to provide that.
Which we could do. I mean, at least we could get it pretty close. We have pictures from all night long of what kind of happened. And I think those are good questions. I had on my question too of the undermining the concrete. I think that's a really important to think about. And, even in pools, you have a hydrostatic valve in them at the bottom where the drain is. And that's mainly so that if groundwater gets too high, that valve will puncture. So that, because if you don't do it, the pool itself, the vessel would float out of the ground. That's how strong, powerful water is. So they call it the $1 million mistake when people don't have valves in. So I was thinking maybe that's a route that they'll need to go, but yeah, I think those are all good discussion points. I mean, we did have benches that, were submerged, that had concrete around them that were undermined by the water. Those obviously weigh a lot less and they're not as thick concrete, underneath it, but it's still a good question, I think, and something I'd like for them to answer before, we move on to that next step. So.
Right. And I know with concrete, you can wedge the edges, make the edges, 12 inches thick, and then the rest of the slab, 4 inches thick to kind of prevent some of that undermining too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to see what they would propose for some of that, because that is an issue. If we had a flood and we ended up with all kinds of cracked concrete slab, it would not be a good situation for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Go down to Mary's place.
Oh yeah.
And Bear Park. That's pretty much, that's one of those that we've had a good freeze thaw now with all the cracks and the different parts in the concrete. It wasn't thick enough, so we're gonna have to redo that concrete at some point too. So yeah, those are good points to bring up and discuss. So.
Hey, Mike, a quick question. There's a location on this drawing where it showed electricity coming in.
Yeah.
At one point, do you think, is there ever going to be electricity along Mill Creek Parkway with lighting?
I don't know. I know initially that was all in discussion when Mill Creek was being done, and no lighting didn't get put in there. I've looked at different, bollards, just doing like solar bollards through like the park area that I think would be a nice addition even on Mill Creek Parkway, but the cost is astronomical, or at least it was a year ago, from a company out of Canada. So, but I mean, they're evolving more and more each day with that kind of technology and that use. So, I mean, if the electricity, doesn't get added along Mill Creek, maybe the solar aspect is an option too.
Right. Well, electricity would be nice, but I think, we have to take it maybe in year phases or something. And, electricity might not happen for a while, but, we'll have to wait and see.
Right. I agree.
Okay, so it doesn't look like we need a motion or anything. We'll put it on the next month's agenda to have, you'll be coming, Mike, with a follow-up report.
Yep. We'll have it on next month's agenda. Sounds good.
Excellent.
I'll just say tabled for now, okay?
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Mike.
Okay, discussion and possible action regarding a concept plan for Bear Park expansion.
All right, I thought we already did this, but going through all of our minutes, I noticed that it was on our agenda in February that we canceled of 2020. So I didn't realize that this hadn't been approved yet by you or the village board, but it has been done now for about 11 months. So, I have kind of a project background report in there, but mainly what it's just doing is kind of giving a new updated parks plan for the Beekner site, which then kind of takes us into the next step of the playground and, where we want to go, which is the next agenda item. But this is the latest concept plan that was provided by Vanderwall and Associates. We took out some things and added some things, as obviously our active recreational uses have kind of changed over the last few years as well. So added some soccer fields and kept the potential future pool facility on this map. But outside of that, didn't make a whole lot of changes other than the playground aspect of where that playground will be located. So.
So do we need a motion to approve the concept plan for the Bear Park expansion? Because we have to move this to the village board then, right, Mike?
Yeah, for them to approve as well. Yep.
Okay.
This is probably our fourth concept plan. And just to keep in mind, the concept aspect of these isn't done like an actual parks plan. So in the future, if, we look to develop or add some high cost options within here, like field development or even the pool, there'd have to be some type of feasibility study in regards to the cost and how much it's going to cost prior to this. But the concept at least puts things in place and puts action and motion in regards to the smaller items like trails, playgrounds, just actual location of things. So we don't, go and put a building on top of where we were planning to do soccer fields per se.
So we can discuss it certainly. Let's get a motion. Do we have a motion to?
I'll make a motion to discuss the latest concept plan for Bear Park expansion. Is that what we're looking for?
A motion to either approve it.
We can discuss it.
Yeah, and then we can discuss it if we have a motion to approve the concept plan.
Yep. Then I'll make a motion to approve the latest concept plan. It looks like, right, latest, is that for Bear Park expansion?
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second to approve the concept plan for Bear Park expansion. So it's open for discussion.
Mike, what has staff said about this? Because obviously we know at some point they want to build police department, community center, all that stuff here. So how does that affect what we're doing? I know with soccer fields, there's not I assume there's not a whole lot of cost in installing that. And one day when they want that land, they can just build over it. But what's staff saying about this?
Yeah, staff is good with it. As you can see, next to where the potential future pool facility, there isn't anything there. That's actually where the bird's eye view was of the building or rec center or village office, police department. So that space is still there. It's not necessarily earmarked or concept anymore. And the main reason is if we were to put that on there, people get the idea like, oh, that's going to happen or it's going to be there tomorrow. It's happened already, obviously, when people were purchasing the homes there. And once again, this is just a concept plan. What's that?
Well, that's because the village let them advertise it that way.
Yeah. So once again, it's just a concept plan. But what this would allow for me, at least, is say, okay, this is where the playground is going to go, right? There was 0.38 acres set aside. This is the 0.38 acres that was given. This is where the playground will go. So you can kind of see where that is.
Is that just the circles, Mike, or is that
Correct.
that whole kind of area?
Nope, just the circle.
Okay.
Yep.
The one or the three circles?
The three circles.
Okay.
Yep. So this kind of helps us then plan as we go out. So we would use this concept to go on to our next motion in regards to setting up the new visioning for our playground and kind of show where that location would be.
Okay.
Mike, forgive me for not knowing this, but what are the ideas, if any, about what would replace where the current pool is behind the library?
So what would happen with that site?
Yeah, just to fill it?
Yeah, there hasn't been a whole lot of discussion in that. Yeah. There's been a lot of just like staff thoughts or my thoughts, like, oh, this could be a really cool dog park, or we could expand our ice skating rink, like just have a warming house. Could it be just a splash pad, area?
Yep,
We already have all the, so there's
the water,
there's ideas if the pool were to ever change or be moved to a location. But I just think it's good. And we discussed, like, do we take out this potential pool facility too, out of the concept plan? Because sometimes, people get too carried away with that and then they get worried and really it's just for future planning. Is there enough space there that would allow for these types of things? That's kind of why you do these concepts. And then, if we're able to do an actual parks plan on this, get some funding in place next year for the planning of this, like how we get football or soccer fields, multi-purpose fields along with parking lot, what's the kind of cost this would take. So some engineering scopes from that as well. So we discussed, do we take out that? But I was like, I really don't want to take it out because that's always been the discussion. So when the village board at the time was looking to purchase this property, that was one of the main things they discussed. So the new police department, village office, community center type discussion was more thought of afterwards due to the amount of land that was available. So I was comfortable taking that out with the current administration and, current board of where we're at right now. So.
Okay, I'm still here. Sorry, I'm just relocating.
Well, action necessarily, Mike. You're just looking, this is just an approval of this plan so we can start moving forward on conceptual ideas that fit this plan, correct?
Yeah, and I think what this also does though is it gets it out into the community a little bit so people can see what it could be. And the big thing is making sure they understand this is what it could be. And it allows staff, I think, to also work to try and put this in motion quicker with outside funding opportunities, or even groups that may be looking to use these types of facilities outside of the time that we're able to use it, or even talking with the school district to say, you know, what are your plans over the next few years, and what is your need in regards to some of this field space? Is there anything that we could collaborate with in offering this opportunity? So I think it's more of that. Just this is our concept, and this is just a concept, but it kind of puts things in motion a little bit on what we're looking to do over the next, 5 years or so.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay.
One thing that I wish there could be more of is space designated for natural areas. Like, I mean, like prairie areas, or I don't know. I guess sometimes I get kind of frustrated that everything becomes so manicured and unnatural.
Yeah, and I think if there are things you can work on with that. I like that plan too. And in a lot of our parks, we have started to do more of, we tried to put, different berries or different trees that can be, more, can be eaten by us, can also be eaten by wildlife. We have a lot of prairie area in our conservancies. We have a lot of restoration that's still continuing in those. I think as we move forward past the concept of this, Sarah, we, can look at, even the stormwater, around the stormwater, could that be natural prairie? I think within that discussion of the plan, so once we start up with some engineer and design aspects, we can look at more rain gardens or, more areas that could be more natural settings. So.
And as you, I know that's far in the future, but just to keep in mind, keeping the school district in the loop on that too, because with the middle school, and I mean, like I used to teach 6th grade science, and like that's right exactly what they were doing. So that would be a really amazing collaboration.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. Sounds good.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes.
Thank you.
And then we'll move to discussion and possible action regarding the procedure, date, and time for a visioning session for the playground at Bear Park.
All right, so in 2021's capital improvement plan, I have in there for a new playground on this site. So these 0.38 acres would have a new playground on it.
And when you say playground, you're talking about like mulch and a slide essentially for 38 grand, right?
Could be. There are some things and some deals that they do. There's also some grants that we could apply for if we find that we need more. I'd like to have that visioning with the community first to see, that's kind of what we did with Glacial Valley. I always tell people like not to get too ahead of themselves in regards to the funding. I get like we only have so much funding, but just like earlier, like let's hold off. There could be other areas or other people that want to donate or, whatever it may be, if it comes in that we need more. But I'd like to start off with that. Just what is your picture? What would you like to see? And also, throw in other outside parameters to other playgrounds that are are in proximity to this one. So what else do we want to see that maybe aren't offered in those that we could do here? And I think there are some really cool options. Just looking on my own, obstacle courses is a new thing that's kind of come up. And one thing that's kind of on the cheaper side, I'd say, to some of the playground opportunities is that. So like, is that an option for us, or, other things? But my thing is, how do we want to do this year with COVID and, doing it virtually? I think it could be kind of tough, making sure that people are able to see or even pinpoint, different things that they'd like. When we do visioning sessions, normally it's in-house and we have books up and, people are marking things and circling and kind of going that way, to kind of give staff an understanding of what they really would like to see. But with COVID, it might be kind of tough. But I wonder, I was just curious if you had any ideas or anything that you think we could do, virtually, or, do we try and do something outdoors, come early spring, try and get the word out here in the next month or so, but then do something early spring or outdoors or
I think people would be pretty comfortable being outdoors. I mean, living in the neighborhood, I see quite a bit of people out, and there's a fair amount that, kind of group together. With COVID, there's, certain groups that are already kind of hanging out with each other. So I don't think you'll have too many issues there.
Okay.
And I would say, to be more inclusive, I think a Zoom meeting would be better, because while some aren't comfortable with that. I guess I think about, like, a lot of people with young kids, it's hard to attend a meeting like that. So actually having it like this, where you can, have your kids sneak in the camera behind you, like, it allows, I think, more people to show up to the meeting. I also wonder if a lot of those things that you want us looking at, if we could just put like links in the chat to different websites that people could be going to, and then writing down different ideas.
Mike, and maybe that's the solution too, is to do a Zoom meeting up front with everybody, and then say that anybody that wants to come outside and then look at it and kind of walk the area, that if they've got questions, they could do that.
Sure. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I was wondering, maybe you answered my question in the beginning, if you would kind of, to some extent, limit more. I felt like the other park, it was truly kind of free form, looking for a lot of catalogs and books and kind of just visioning, what our wants and needs were, or if you were really kind of budget or kind of something new to our parks that isn't available in other parks that we have in Cross Plains, if you would almost limit it like a menu of, this is, wood chips versus rubber chips, or rubber, or would you just say, we're just going to do wood? And then, but you can pick a slide from these 4 slides, or, and maybe that would be an easier thing to drive virtually versus here, go to this 54-page PDF book and tell us what pages you like.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I was thinking more menu style, but that's entirely up to you.
I kind of like that idea, just because then, not, even though I just talked about budget and not worrying about it, I guess knowing where the funds currently are, it keeps us in somewhat of a parameter. We may need more funding, but it doesn't get us where we need $100,000 or something in that regard. So
yeah.
It's kind of we're not thinking this is going to be like the playground that draws people, like our flagship playground. This is
I hope every playground draws people from all over, right? Like I think the idea behind, like, just doing, like, most of our playgrounds prior to Glacial Valley and Cedar Glen were all the same. They all we pretty much went with the same manufacturer, and they all have the same amenities. I'd like to see us just kind of evolve in that, and like, maybe it's less playground and more just active area, or like just something different. Might be more natural type settings in this area. I don't know, but I don't see it, no, Sarah, as another, destination playground per se, like we have at Glacial Valley, but hopefully we're able to, do that for everything that we bring in that's new.
Well, I will tell you that if there's not something, significant, or something that kind of gets to where the neighborhood thinks it should be, there's going to be quite an uproar, especially from me. We got screwed by the village on this whole deal, and only getting the amount of money that we got, and letting Viridian get off the hook for not paying for a park.
Well, I'd be careful about that, Jed. You didn't get screwed. They did pay parkland dedication for the 43 lots. The one thing that you have to realize is most subdivisions, or most areas that are developed, we're looking at 100+ lots. So you have a lot more money to use and pick from when you have more homes. Now with 43 lots, even with our current standard, I'd have to look and see what that difference is. Since then our impact fees have increased, but overall within the development agreement, they did pay the amount, and we do have the amount that we should have for 43 homes. So I'd be careful with that a little bit. Now, not having them put in a park right away, or not having them designate land that should have been a park once you got to 20 some homes, I mean, that could be discussed a little bit more. But I think the whole plan or whole thought behind staff and the village board at that time was, this Glacier Creek has a park, Bear Park already has a playground. Is there really a need for another one, or do we use this for other needs throughout this developed area? And when you came in, and when people bought the homes, they're the ones that really should be making that decision, in my opinion. It shouldn't be left up to people that it doesn't impact. So that's why I think.
Well, and there was some discussions, but we've talked again that the access to Bear Park is not that great for us, especially those of us with young kids.
Right.
I mean, there's no easy route there. You have to go all the way up and around the road, and then to the sidewalk, and then cross the street and come back around. And I know having the middle school was also part of that discussion as well, but there's really not much for amenities there that the kids can use.
Yeah, for that age group. Yeah. Well, I think let's see what we get, and hopefully, or see what can come out of this for that amount, and hopefully it's everything you've dreamed of or wanted in that area. And if not, then maybe we go back to the drawing board and say, we need to invest more money, or the village is looking, would the village be willing to invest more money, or can we do a fundraiser? Like I said, there could be other options for us, or could we reach out to Viridian or other areas that, maybe they would channel back on and help us out at that point too. So
another thing, just to the topic that's on the table, would it be an option for residents to check out, to reserve the books?
Yeah, that's definitely, that could be a good option. And actually, I wonder if the library would even help with that. Just, being an easy place for people to go that are going already to check things out, if that could be an option. It's a good idea.
You could take them home for 48 hours or 24 hours. Sarah, do you think that is something that people that are not comfortable would they be comfortable if they had the option of a Zoom meeting and being able to check out the books?
Yeah, I think that would be good. But wouldn't a lot of this information be available online or not?
There is, yeah. A lot of their new things sometimes won't be. They wait till they do this exclusive book, that comes out with it, and then later it's online. But
I would say for the most part right now, if you sent out those links, I know I am personally much more likely to go look through some websites than to go check out a book.
Yeah, I think what I could do is just put, as I put a public visioning session agenda out with like the Zoom link, I would just add all the links of, different playground companies in our area that people could click on beforehand, and then have that sheet that we used for Glacial Valley that people can put, rank things and put it in there. Going back to what Jennifer said too, though, about a limited menu, that would be kind of tough to do, I think, at that time. But
I feel like this is something where if we get a vision of what we want, and like say, the village has a certain budget and there was like something extra, I do feel like there could be some fundraising done. And
well, and the other thing is, like, playgrounds could always be expanded on, and knowing that ahead of time, like if we know, we have 30,000+ right now to do X and we really want Y and Z, I can put that in the capital improvement plan for later too. And really when the capital improvement plan comes out for the village board to go over and discuss, that's when, as constituents or people, in your neighborhoods, that's when I ask, come forward and say, this is a need, it's a request that we really want. And or need in our neighborhoods, because staff usually can only go like so far with stuff, you know, especially parks and rec. We're usually last to get things approved. So, right, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and things get pushed to the next year's budget and the
Yeah,
next.
exactly. Yeah, there's never a good time, but I
That-
think, you know, like you're saying, collaborating, you know, with outside organizations always tends to help a little bit too. That's how we've got most of our capital to, you know, be approved, and even fund balance, you know, if it's there. We don't have our own anymore, but the village general budget will still have a fund balance, so that's not borrowed money. So it's always an opportunity too. But I think getting a good vision of what, you know, would look good on 0.38 acres, but also with the expansion of that park. I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to want more than probably $30,000 worth of equipment once all those soccer fields are running, you know, or even the pool. So I think visioning it, and if we have to phase it, you know, that becomes that decision at the time. So
How soon are you looking at putting the soccer fields in?
I don't have that in the CIP, so it would be something that would be added. Now that a concept's kind of done, I would like to do, you know, engineering, planning and engineering for that probably next year if they would give me funding for it, and then, you know, the following year if possible to put in the fields. So
Okay.
So do you need action on this? Do you want to pick a date today, Mike?
yeah, that'd be ideal. I think picking a date, it gives me kind of a deadline, you know, to make sure I get stuff out to everyone, and then, you know, I'd like, if possible, for, you know, one or all of you to be available if you could be there to talk, you know, to constituents as well, or at least spread the word that it's going to happen these dates. And
So early spring can mean a lot of different things to different people. To me, early spring is like June when you can actually go out without a coat on. But technically, it's more like mid-March. What are you thinking, Mike?
yeah, I was thinking like more April, like March or April. I'd like to get it done so that way I have some time to plan, you know, and if we're able to still do it this summer with a small amount, or, you know, late summer, early fall, that'd probably be ideal.
Do you need anything out to happen outdoors, Mike, for this?
In regards
The
to
visioning session.
the visioning, I don't think so. I think the biggest thing would be just putting the documents together for the links. If people wanted to meet and discuss it further, you know, we could always set up a time to meet out there at a different time too, on site. But I think having the map, the concept map too, that people can see, will play into that too, so that they can kind of vision what would be there. You know,
I'm thinking March. I mean, if you don't need to be outdoors, so you're not relying on weather.
mhm.
And also it kind of gets everybody energized. The weather's getting nicer. People want to start thinking about outdoors. And not everybody is completely outdoors yet. So they're not, you know, do I go outside for a walk or do I go to the visioning, Zoom visioning that I've been sitting all winter inside on Zoom. So I like the March idea personally.
And you would want it on a night different than the scheduled PRC meeting, right, Mike?
Yeah, preferably.
Okay.
I mean, Jed or even Sarah, you live in the neighborhood. Could pick a night that's going to work for both of you for sure, so that way you can bring all your neighbors' requests when they can't make it.
Never count on me to be anywhere. Well, I guess if it's Zoom, it's not that big of a deal, but I mean, we've got the Facebook group, and, you know, word of mouth, we can start asking around. But Mike, I would suggest for you just to give me a day or two or three that work best for you.
Okay.
And we'll put it out there. I don't know if you want it before one of our meetings, you know, if you want it a week before our meeting, so you got time to process it, or what you want, but.
Yeah, I'm doing interviews like like spring break, which is the 29th, through like that whole week. And then the week before we are, so how about like What about the 16th or 17th? That work for anyone?
Of March.
Yeah,
The 17th is St. Patrick's Day, I believe. So
yeah,
maybe,
we can have a party.
maybe not. Well, maybe not St. Patrick's Day.
Okay,
Not that I'm gonna probably do anything exciting, but like it
Right.
might make some
just
people
the idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get it. How about the
If
16th?
you have green beer available, you might get more people.
Yeah,
That's
there
true.
you go. Yeah,
Take
Maybe we
out.
do it at the wine bar or somewhere,
There you
right?
go.
say that would bring out our neighborhood, I think.
All right, I'll ask about the 16th, Mike, and I can
Okay.
get back to you.
Okay. So
Do you have a time?
I think
I
I would
think
do, yeah, that was actually another request. I like the 6 o'clock, but we could do later if that's better too.
I'll ask about 6.
Personally, I would say like 6:30 even would be nicer, just so people can like get their dinner and
Yeah. We can change it to, or I can put 6:30. That's fine.
Well,
Alright.
and it could even start at 6, like open house style at
Yeah.
6, and then,
Mhm.
you know, with a discussion to begin around 6:30 or something.
March.
Do you need action on this? Because it'd be nice if you could have the date before our February, sooner than later, so it can be in the newsletter and such too. Because there will be people
Our
that are,
newsletter would be in March, actually, so that would give really, yeah, that would give at least like a week or so, even if if the newsletter went out on like the 8th or 9th.
Yeah.
It'd give people like a week to kind of plan for it, but I was thinking, at least for the neighbors that are around there and maybe even the school, is just drop off flyers at each house that are there, just saying this is what we're doing. We do that for water breaks and things, so I could just go door to door and meet the neighbors.
cool.
we'll say it's not the greatest time to talk to the school about anything. So I'm not sure that they're gonna want to.
Yeah, that's
They're a
true.
little busy.
That's true.
Would you, if you put it in the newsletter, would you put links also to the catalogs or the materials, or would you
That's a
reserve
good
that
question.
for the Zoom?
It's a good question. I think it'd be good for people to have early. So
Yeah.
in the newsletter would be good.
Yeah.
Becky's always looking for more information for the newsletter. So
Score.
and it's online now, so you should be able to just click on the links too. So that'd be nice.
Exactly. They can kind of pre-plan as
Yeah.
time allows. So
Yep.
when they come, they can then hear and then submit papers and go.
Yeah. So the 16th at 6:30 p.m. Yeah, should be good.
Mhm.
Sounds good.
Jed, are you
I don't-
going to post that?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
They have like a whole it's just you Facebook groups, just like
Yeah.
your neighborhood.
It's
Oh
the
boy.
neighborhood.
Oh boy.
And Mike, will we still plan to meet on that Monday, the 15th? Because that would typically be our meeting date, right? Third Monday?
You are
Mhm.
correct. Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, we'd meet the night before. Yeah, that'd be fine. That'll be all right. All right, should be good. No action again.
Okay.
Or at least we had discussion on it. That's good.
Did we approve the map? I can't remember.
Approve what?
The map?
No, the conceptual plan? No. We
We
didn't
did.
vote on that.
We have to
Yeah,
vote on that.
yeah, you did.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
Okay.
Oh, we,
I couldn't remember.
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Jennifer. Motion. Jed seconded, and everybody said aye.
That's
I didn't have any nays. So
Okay.
we're good.
Okay, last discussion and possible action regarding the painting of the Cross Plains Pool building.
All right, so we've had requests for the painting of this building for at least 3 years. I mean, or I'd say at least 2 years, maybe even 3 years, either from constituents, but then also a lot of the swim team parents and people. So Jeff Mahoney had been in contact with me 2 years ago now, saying that if we provided all the supplies for the project, he would more or less take the project on and find all the volunteers to make sure that the exterior of the building got painted. So I held him up on, I'm holding him to that still to this day. And I did talk to him. So he's still 100% on board. He also is going to talk with Emily Spahn, who's the new swim team president, and discuss how they could make this kind of a team venture here early spring. So Sarah Francois has brought this up to me a couple of times as well, and I just wanted to bring you up to speed on it. What I'll probably ask is, once I'm able to understand what the costs are going to be, I have some ideas of colors, and we've talked about that. I think I even put in my memo, I could have some for you, which I went on Sherwin-Williams, and you can put your building on, or like your house or whatever you want, and then you can hit colors and kind of see what it's going to look like. So at a future time, I will, or if you have some ideas on what colors you'd like to see, you can kind of let me know and we can bring this back. But once we understand, how many gallons of paint it's going to be and brushes and how many volunteers, I'll request that we use park improvement money to fund this project come here early spring. So this last fall, staff worked to power wash the entire building. So is how bad it looked previous. It looks even worse now. So we're going to want to make sure that we get it painted right away here in the spring or early summer. We just didn't want the power washing aspect or the cleaning of the facility to hold us up again come spring. So
Mike, since you've already connected with Jeff Mahoney about this, will you maybe put in the next newsletter that it is going to be painted? Because if you didn't know that, you would think, wow, the pool really looks run down right now. I actually clued my husband in. I'm like, that was intentional.
Yeah,
They
that's a
power washed.
Good call. I will put something in the newsletter in March. We could even throw out a post on Facebook or other places, just kind of let people know this is what we are doing.
Yeah.
I was thinking before, like, we would do a poll and let people choose kind of what color, but I think without giving them options, that's a really bad idea. So, but maybe we do a poll on, these are the 3 options, what do you think? So that might get people out there too, to understand what we're doing. But
it might be kind of fun too, everyone's cheering on their pool house color, and
right.
you announce the winner. So,
yes.
I had mentioned, or I'd emailed Mike this week as well. This is Melissa. Just wondering if there might be a possibility that people could donate gallons of paint to the project. And I said that's something I would certainly be willing and happy to do. And I think that might be a possibility, but maybe Mike said that might be something better run through the swim team than through the village.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd be careful on is maybe we come up with a cost of what a gallon would be, and then they can donate the actual money, and then we just have all the paint. Is that what you were thinking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Or purchase it
swim team
directly from the paint store.
Yeah, as long
You
as
don't have to exchange the money. They did that with that grocery thing where they were giving out food to the police department did. They just had them buy it directly from the grocery store. So you don't have to change hands with money, because that was the issue.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I put the square footage of the building in on the Sherwin-Williams site and all that stuff. And I was like, it said we only needed 20 gallons of paint. And I was like, I thought we would need 20 gallons just for one side, So I'm going to go in there and kind of talk with them and see more about but I just think that it's going to take more paint than that. And also gives me an idea of like what colors to kind of choose from. Unless any of you have some really good, I hate choosing colors. It's my least favorite thing to probably do. But then once I do see them, I'm kind of picky about it, which is kind of bad. So if any of you have any ideas of what colors you'd like to see, or we looked at like a neutral gray and then a white, border. You both shake your heads no to that.
Well, Emily, the current president of the Stingrays.
Yeah.
He is like a bona fide design color expert and has been featured in like a designing magazine.
Oh, well, then she
That's
should
what
be
I
taking
was
this
just
on.
gonna say, and I'm actually texting her right now saying,
Like-
we're talking about the pool because
He is our best person for colors, seriously.
Well, that sounds great.
You're
Oh.
texting her, Sarah?
yeah, now I'm going to tell her that we.
I didn't know that about her, so that's great.
Oh yeah, she
Good
was
to hear.
already, yeah.
She was like
Awesome.
a full page spread, like interior of her home.
That's
Maybe
awesome.
more than once, I think.
That's
So-
great. That sounds good. Well, I know Jeff had talked to her before, or he had said he had talked to her, so that'll be good. I've talked with her just about the, what's the plan kind of this year, and if they had a schedule, because people have been calling to rent out the pavilion and pool, and I haven't been approving it yet, just to wait to see what their schedule is. But no, it sounds good.
Do you need action?
No action tonight. I just wanted it to be on your radar. And the pool improvement money has roughly 40 some $1,000s in it. The pool improvement comes from $5 on everybody's memberships over the years, and $5 from their swim lessons over the years. So it's just a direct payment into an improvement for the pool. The plan is to and it's also was part of the Cross Plains pub crawl that was started up years ago. It's no longer ran, mainly because it was ran through swim team. And then swim team asked us to take it on as they didn't want to do it anymore. And we ran it a couple of years, but then I just kind of thought we shouldn't be doing that. So if any of you would like to take it on, that sounds great. But as far as staff, I just don't think it's something we should be doing. So, but other
Mike, one more thing
fundraisers.
about the pool though, other than the paint, do you already have the supplies, or is that all? That's additional items that you'll need, like brushes and rollers and things like
Yeah,
that.
we would need brushes, rollers. We may have some, we have some paint trays, but
Yeah.
most of the time we buy really cheap brushes that we use one time and, throw them out for our projects. So.
Okay.
Yeah. And the last time that this was painted was actually my first summer here. So it was 2006. And it was the Lions Club that painted it that brown. So I don't know what color it was before that, but the Lions were involved in the painting of it last time. So maybe they would like to get involved in that as well. But.
It was a nice light blue, Mike.
Oh, really?
Yeah, not too light. It was kind of a medium-ish, almost like the color on our logo, from what I remember.
It might be worth talking again with the swim team, because it sounds like they have a lot of interest in being involved in the project.
Yeah, that's what
Absolutely.
Jeff has said. I mean, he had already kind of geared up to do it, and then COVID hit. So their whole thought was they were gonna, power wash it, get it ready, and paint it last summer already. But then with COVID, that obviously kind of slowed things down. So now I feel comfortable, like just from our standpoint with volunteers, at putting parameters in place to make sure everyone's safe. Hopefully this summer everyone's vaccinated or the virus is gone and we don't have to worry about it. But until then, I feel comfortable with that project and being able to paint the outside of the building. So
They had their Give Back Day, which, we established several
Mhm.
years ago, and we've done different things with Ice Age and around town. So I think that the thought was that could be part of the Give Back Day.
okay, no, it sounds good. Yeah, and just ideally it'd get done before we open for the season, but that's not really, I mean, if we don't hit that date, I would just want to make sure it's done, maybe pick a point in the summer or
Mhm.
midsummer that it's done by, that we're not, carrying it on. So
Maybe the give back day could be
like our
Preseason.
painting, changed to preseason, or,
Yeah.
doing touch-ups in the cabana, locker room, bathhouse rooms.
Before we
Yeah.
start asking
Yeah.
residents to pay for pool memberships.
Emily did say that they have a meeting on the 25th. So if there's anything that you want.
of
brought up.
January.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so I think we're looking for a motion to adjourn. Our next meeting would be scheduled for February the 15th. At 6 p.m.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Meeting adjourned. We'll see you guys in February.
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.